The Architecture of Winning: How to Build a Daily Routine That Actually Achieves Your Goals. A no-nonsense blueprint for the serious achiever. Introduction: The hard truth nobody wants to hear. Most people don't fail because of a lack of talent. They don't fail because of bad luck, or because the economy was against them, or because their parents weren't supportive enough, or because the timing was off. They fail quietly, slowly, painfully, because their days are a disaster. They wake up at inconsistent times. They check their phone before their feet hit the floor. They drift through the morning reacting to other people's priorities. They burn through hours of half concentration, confusing motion for progress. They end the day exhausted, but somehow unable to name a single meaningful thing they accomplished. And then they do it again tomorrow. This is not a character flaw. It is a systems failure. The good news, and this is the thing that will likely liberate you or make you deeply uncomfortable, is that your current results are a direct and precise reflection of your current daily behaviors. Not your intentions, not your potential, not what you tell yourself at 11 p.m. when you're lying in bed with regret. Your behaviors, what you actually do, hour by hour, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you close them. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. A quote by James Clear. That quote has been shared a million times, but the reason it keeps circulating is because people read it, nod, feel briefly inspired, and then do absolutely nothing about it. They don't change the system, they change the goal. They set a bigger target, write it on a sticky note, and expect different results from the same daily behaviors. That is the definition of insanity. And it's also the standard operating procedure for about 92% of goal setters. This essay is for the other 8%. Or rather, it's written to pull you from the 92% into the 8%. It's a comprehensive, no-fluff, battle-tested framework for constructing a daily routine that doesn't just feel good on paper, but actually produces results in the real world. The kind of results that compound, the kind that after 12 months makes other people ask, how did you do that so fast? The answer will be boring. The answer will be one day at a time, with a very deliberate structure, and that's exactly why it works. We're going to cover everything: why most productivity advice is backward, how to design your morning with surgical precision, how to structure your work so you're not just busy but genuinely productive, how to manage your energy, not just your time, how to end your day in a way that sets tomorrow up for a success, and how to build the kind of identity that makes all of this tick along after motivation has evaporated. Buckle up. This is going to be direct. Some of it will sting, all of it will help. Part 1. Why your current routine is keeping you broke, stuck, and tired. The myth of willpower. Here's something the self-help industry doesn't want you to know. Willpower is finite. It's a resource. It depletes. And the way most people structure their days, they're burning through their entire reserve of willpower before they even start on the things that matter the most. You wake up, you scroll Instagram, you decide what to wear, you scan your email, you answer a few texts, you figure out what to eat for breakfast, you debate whether to exercise. By the time you sit down to do the single most important thing that will move your life forward, you made a dozen micro decisions, each one drawing from the same cognitive bank account, and now you're running on fumes. This is called decision fatigue, and it is one of the most underestimated destroyers of human potential on the planet. A 2011 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that judges made significantly more favorable rulings early in the day compared to late in the day. Not because the cases were different, but because their decision-making capacity had eroded. If this happens to trained professionals making life-altering decisions in a controlled environment, imagine what it's doing to you trying to build a business, write a book, or get in shape while navigating the chaos of modern life. The solution is not to get more willpower. The solution is to design your environment and your schedule so that willpower is rarely required. You make the decisions in advance. You build a structure so that the default behavior is the right behavior. The reactive life versus the design life. There are two types of people. There are people who design their days, and there are people whose days are designed for them. The second type, by far the majority, wakes up and immediately enters reaction mode. The phone tells them what to think about, the news tells them how to feel, the inbox tells them what to work on, social media tells them how to compare themselves. Other people's urgencies becomes their priorities. And at the end of a full day of responding, reacting, and accommodating, they wonder why they never seem to get ahead. The first type, the rare, infuriating, successful people you look up to, wakes up and executes a plan. Not because they're more disciplined, not because they have more hours in the day, but because they made deliberate choices about how those hours will be spent. And they build structures to protect those choices from interference. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is almost always a gap between reactive living and design living. Every day you spend reactive is a day you spend building someone else's dream. Every day you spend design is a day you spend building your own. The compounding problem. Here's the thing about bad daily routines that people underestimate: the damage compounds. One wasted morning doesn't ruin your life, but 300 wasted mornings? That's a year of your life where the most cognitively powerful hours of your day went to email, scrolling, and doing things that felt urgent but weren't important. 300 mornings of not moving your most critical projects forward. 300 mornings of choosing comfort over growth. On the flip side, one productive morning doesn't change your life either. But 300 productive mornings, that's 300 hours of deep, focused work applied to the things that matter most. Over a year, that might mean a finished book, a launched product, a transformed body, or a fundamentally different financial picture. The math is simple. The execution is where most people fail. The person who spends just one extra focus hour per day on their most important work for 300 days has invested 300 hours more than their peers in the direction of their goals. At a conservative estimate of output, that's the equivalent of hiring someone to work for you for nearly 2 full months for free, just by restructuring your morning. This is why routine is not a luxury. It's not a nice to have for high performers. It is the mechanism of which ordinary people achieve extraordinary results. It is the great equalizer. Time is the one resource that is perfectly equally distributed. The question is whether you're spending yours with intention. Part 2. Designing the Morning Protocol. The foundation. Why mornings are non-negotiable. Not all hours are created equal. Your brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for complex thinking, decision-making, creativity, and willpower, is freshest in the morning. After sleep, your cognitive resources are at a maximum capacity. Cortisol, your alertness hormone, peaks in the first hour after waking. Your willpower reserves are full. The world hasn't yet had a chance to pull you in 17 different directions. This is your golden window. It is the most valuable real estate in your entire day. And what do most people do with it? They hand it over to strangers on the internet. They start scrolling, reacting, and consuming. They squander the most cognitively powerful hours of their 24-hour cycle on content that does nothing to move them towards their goals. Protecting your morning is not about being antisocial or rigid. It's about recognizing that the first 60 to 120 minutes of your day are uniquely irreplaceable and treating them accordingly. The 5-element morning protocol. Over years of studying the routines of high performers across dozens of industries, a consistent pattern emerges. The best mornings are not identical, but they contain the same core elements in varying forms. Here they are and why each one matters. Element 1. The no input zone. First 30 minutes. The single most powerful change most people can make to their morning is also the simplest. Don't consume anything for the first 30 minutes after waking. No phone, no news, no podcast, no social media, no email. Nothing. This isn't mythical advice. It's neurological hygiene. When you wake up, your brain is in a semi-hypnagogic state. a liminal space between sleep and full wakefulness where your subconscious is still highly active and your critical filters are not yet fully engaged. The content you consume in this window has a disproportionately powerful effect on your emotional state, your mindset, and your cognitive set points for the day. When you pick up your phone first thing and see a stressful email, a political headline, or a highlight reel of someone else's success, you prime your brain for anxiety, reactivity, and comparison, and that priming can persist for hours. When instead you allow your mind to emerge from sleep naturally, without external input, you preserve that mental clarity and give yourself the ability to consciously choose your mental state for the day. Think of it this way. Your mind is a high-performance engine. The first thing you pour into it after it's been resting sets the temperature for everything that follows. Pour in garbage and you'll be managing the heat all day. Pour in nothing or pour in intentional content and you run clean. Element 2. Movement. 20 to 45 minutes. This doesn't have to be a full workout. It doesn't have to be a 45-minute HIIT session or a 10-mile run. It just has to be intentional physical movement that elevates your heart rate and gets blood flow into your brain. The science is overwhelming. Morning exercise releases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially fertilizer for your neurons. It triggers endorphin release. It increases dopamine and serotonin levels. It reduces cortisol and anxiety. And perhaps, most practically, it creates a psychological win. You've done something hard before most people have gotten out of bed. And that sense of accomplishment creates momentum and carries through the entire day. A 20-minute walk, a 30-minute weight session, a yoga flow, a bike ride, whatever form it takes, morning movement is not optional if you want to operate at a high level. The people who consistently perform at the top of their fields are, without exception, people who move their bodies regularly, not because they're health fanatics, because they understand that physical performance and cognitive performance are not separate. They're the same thing. Element 3. Mindset anchoring. 10 to 15 minutes. Call it meditation, journaling, prayer, visualization, or simply quiet reflection. But every high performer has some version of a mindset anchoring practice. This is the intentional act of getting clear on who you are, what you're trying to build, and why it matters, before the chaos of the day can obscure that clarity. The most effective format includes 3 components. Gratitude, training your brain to scan for the positive rather than defaulting to threat detection. Intention setting, deciding in advance how you want to show up today. And goal visualization, spending a few minutes vividly imagining the outcomes you're working towards, and if they already happen. This is not wishful thinking or pseudoscience. The reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters reality and determines what you consciously notice, is fundamentally trainable. What you focus on constantly, you begin to see more of. Entrepreneurs who visualize their success don't just feel better, they literally start noticing opportunities, connections, and ideas that confirm the direction they've chosen. You become a filter that's tuned to your goals. Element 4. Strategic planning. 10 to 15 minutes. Before you begin work, you need to know exactly what work you're going to do. This sounds obvious. Most people skip it entirely. They sit down at their desk, open their email or their to-do list, and start doing whatever seems most urgent or most comfortable. The result is a day of business with no coherent direction. The strategic planning block is where you identify your single most important task, MIT, for the day. The one thing that, if you accomplish nothing else, will make this a successful day. It's where you schedule your deep work blocks, more on this shortly. It's where you consciously choose what is important versus what is merely urgent. The key question to ask during this block is, if I can only accomplish one thing today, what will create the most value toward my primary goal? Everything else, every email, every meeting, every favor for a colleague, gets subordinated to that primary task. This is not about being selfish. It's about being effective. You can't help others from a position of stagnation. You have to keep moving forward. Element 5. The anchor habit. 5 to 10 minutes. This is the element most people overlook, and it might be the most behaviorally important. The anchor habit is a small, specific action that you always do at the end of your morning protocol and at the beginning of your work period. It functions as a psychological trigger, a ritual that tells your brain it's time to execute. For some people, it's brewing a specific cup of coffee before they open the laptop. For others, it's a specific playlist. For others, it's reading one paragraph from a book that inspires them, or reviewing their goals reading in their own handwriting. The content matters less than the consistency. The brain loves pattern recognition, and when you repeat the same trigger action sequence enough times, the mere act of performing the trigger begins to elicit the focused state you need. Pavlov's dogs are not a metaphor here. They're a model. You can condition yourself to enter deep work mode with the same reliability that those dogs salivated at a bell, if you're consistent with the conditioning. Part 3. The Deep Work Architecture. Understanding the difference between shallow and deep. The most important distinction in modern knowledge work is not between hard work and easy work. It's between deep work and shallow work. Shallow work is cognitive work, performed in a state of distraction. Email, Slack messages, quick calls, administrative tasks, attending meetings that could have been memos. It's work that's easy to replicate, easy to interrupt, and easy to look busy doing. Shallow work is necessary, but it moves the needle barely, if at all, on your most important outcomes. Deep work, a term popularized by Cal Newport, but practiced by virtually every great achiever in history. It's cognitively demanding work performed in a state of deep concentration without distraction. Writing, strategic thinking, building, creating, problem solving at a high level. Deep work is where your real value is created. It's where you write the book, build the product, solve the hard problem, create the system that will generate results for years. Here's the brutal truth. In the current distraction economy, the ability to do deep work is becoming simultaneously more rare and more valuable. As more people become addicted to shallow work, to the constant pinging of notifications, the dopamine hit of checking metrics, the comfort of business, the few who can actually sit down for 90 to 180 minutes of uninterrupted, intense concentration are the ones who will produce disproportionate value, and disproportionate value translates to disproportionate reward. Structuring your deep work blocks. Most people, when they try to do deep work, fail within 15 minutes. They get an itch to check their email. They remember something they forgot to do. They decide they need more coffee before they can focus. They let their phone sit on the desk and, like a gravitational pull, it draws their eyes every few minutes. After an hour of what they believe was focused work, they've actually spent 40 minutes in shallow distraction and 20 minutes in a half-focused model. This is not a character flaw. This is what happens when you try to deep work without the right architecture. Here's the architecture. Time block in 90-minute units. The human ultradian rhythm, a natural psychological cycle, runs in approximately 90 minutes increments. This is not arbitrary. It's the same cycle that governs sleep stages. For about 90 minutes, your brain can sustain high-intensity focused work. After that, it needs a break. Fighting this biological reality doesn't make you tougher. It makes you less effective. Schedule your deep work in 90-minute blocks. Not 2 hours, not 3 hours, 90 minutes, with a 20 to 30-minute recovery break between blocks. During the work block, you are completely off all communication. During the recovery break, you're completely off all work. No half and half, no just checking one thing. Compartmentalization is what makes both the work and the recovery actually work. Create a distraction-free environment. This sounds simple. It is simple. Most people just don't do it. Your phone goes in another room or on airplane mode. Your email client is closed, not minimized, closed. Notifications are off. Your workspace is clear of anything that isn't related to the single task you're working on. Studies consistently show that even the presence of a smartphone on your desk, face down, turned off, reduces cognitive capacity. The mere possibility of distraction is itself distracting. Your brain allocates a portion of its processing power to resisting or managing the distraction, leaving less for the actual work. This is not about discipline. It's about engineering your environment so your brain isn't fighting itself. Start smaller than you think you should. If you currently can't focus for 20 minutes without reaching for your phone, you're not going to suddenly do 90-minute deep work blocks. You need to build the capacity first. Start with 25 minutes, a Pomodoro, then 35, then 50, then 75, then 90. The ability to sustain intense concentration is a skill that atrophies from disuse and strengthens from practice. Treat it like a muscle. You don't walk into a gym and bench press 300 pounds on your first day. You build up. The daily schedule template. Based on everything above, here's a concrete daily schedule template for someone working towards a significant goal. This is not a prescription. It's a blueprint. You adapt it to your life, your constraints, your peak hours. But this architecture, or something very close to it, is what the most productive people on earth actually use. 5 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. Wake and no input zone. Don't touch your phone. Hydrate. Let your mind come to consciousness on its own terms. 5:30 to 6 a.m. Movement. Walk, lift, stretch, run. Get your body online. 6 a.m. to 6:20 a.m. Mindset anchoring. Gratitude, intention, visualization. 6:20 to 6:35 a.m. Strategic planning. MIT identified, deep works block schedule, day mapped. 6:30 to 8:05 a.m. Deep work block 1. Your single most important task. Nothing else, no interruptions. 8:05 to 8:30 a.m. Recovery break. Walk outside, eat breakfast, don't check email yet. 8:30 to 10 a.m. Deep work block 2. Second most important project or continuation of block 1. 10 to 10:30 a.m. Communication and collaboration. Email, Slack, messages. Everything that was waiting. 10:30 to 12 p.m. Meetings, calls, and reactive work. Anything collaborative. 12 to 1 p.m. Lunch and genuine recovery. Not eating at your desk while working. 1 to 2:30 p.m. Deep work block 3. Optional if needed. Creative or strategic work. Harder post-lunch, so save easier deep work for this slot. 2:30 to 5 p.m. Shallow work. Admin, learning, planning, correspondence. 5 to 6 p.m. Physical activity, if not done in the morning, or transition ritual. 6 to 9 p.m. Family, relationships, hobbies. Full presence. Work does not belong here. 9 to 9:30 p.m. Evening protocol. Covering detail in part 5. 9:30 to 10 p.m. Wind down. No screens. Reading, reflection, preparation for sleep. 10 to 10:30 p.m. Sleep. This schedule assumes an early riser, but the principles apply regardless of your sleep timing. The key elements are morning protocol before any communication, deep work blocks during your highest energy hours, communication and shallow work batch into specific windows, and a genuine evening shutdown. You can slide the whole schedule 2-3 hours later and preserve all of the structural benefits. Part 4. Energy management, the missing piece. Why time management alone doesn't work. Here's the thing most productivity systems get fundamentally wrong. They treat time as the limiting factor. They optimize for time, more efficient use of time blocking, time auditing, time multiplying. But time is not your limiting factor. Energy is. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else, but a person who is running on 5 hours of fragmented sleep, eating processed food, sitting in artificial light all day, and chronically stressed is operating with 30% of their cognitive and physical capacity. A person who sleeps 8 hours, ate real food, exercise, spend time in sunlight, and manage their stress is operating at 100%. They can accomplish in 4 hours what the first person cannot accomplish in 12. The math is brutal and simple. You cannot time manage your way to high performance. You have to energy manage your way there. And that means taking the boring stuff sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress management with the same seriousness that you take your calendar. The four dimensions of energy. Physical energy, the foundation. Physical energy is the base layer. Without it, everything else collapses. And the four pillars of physical energy are so unsexy that most people skip them in favor of biohacks, supplements, and productivity apps. They are sleep, nutrition, exercise, and hydration. Sleep is the one most people sacrifice first, which is also the most catastrophically counterproductive thing you can do. Sleep deprivation reduces cognitive function more than most people realize. Being awake for 17 consecutive hours produces cognitive impairment equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. At 24 hours, it's equivalent to 0.10%, legally drunk. And yet, we celebrate pulling all-nighters like it's a badge of honor. It's not. It's a form of self-sabotage. 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is not a luxury. For most adults, it is the minimum requirement for optimal brain function. If you're consistently sleeping less than this and telling yourself you've adapted to less sleep, you haven't adapted. You just lost the ability to accurately perceive how impaired you are. The scientific literature on this is unambiguous. Nutrition is almost as important as sleep, and almost as poorly managed by most ambitious people. Skipping breakfast, eating at your desk, relying on caffeine to manage energy fluctuations, eating large carbohydrate-heavy meals in the middle of the day. All of these create energy volatility that directly undermines your ability to do work. The ideal is consistent blood sugar, achieved through regular meals that include adequate protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. This isn't a diet book, so the specifics are beyond the scope. But the principle is simple. Your brain is a biological organ that requires consistent fuel, and the quality of the fuel determines the quality of the output. Mental energy, protecting your cognitive capacity. Mental energy is depleted by decisions, multitasking, information overload, and sustained attention on difficult problems. It's restored by single tasking, creative play, physical movement, sleep, and genuine disconnection from work. The most important mental energy management strategy, beyond sleep, is the elimination of unnecessary decisions. This is why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. It's why Barack Obama had his suits pre-selected for him. It's why the most effective executives standardize their routines as much as possible. Not because they're robots, but because they understand that every decision, no matter how small, draws from the same cognitive budget. Look at your daily life and count the number of trivial decisions you make before noon. What to wear, what to eat, which task to start with, whether to answer that email now or later, where to sit, what music to play. Each of these seems inconsequential. Collectively, they represent a massive drain on your most finite resource. Standardize everything you can. Routine is not the enemy of creativity. It is an enabler, because it frees up your cognitive capacity for the things that actually require creative thought. Emotional energy, the wild card. Emotional energy is the most underestimated and least talked about dimension in productivity literature, but it might be the most impactful. A person dealing with unresolved relationship conflict, chronic anxiety, financial stress, or resentment toward their work is operating with a massive hidden tax on their performance. Even if they're showing up, sitting down, and going through the motions, a substantial portion of their cognitive and creative resources are being consumed by the emotional background noise. Managing emotional energy means proactively addressing the sources of emotional drain in your life. It means having the difficult conversations instead of letting resentment fester. It means making the financial decisions you've been avoiding. It means setting boundaries with people who consistently deplete you. None of this is comfortable. All of it is necessary. High performers are not people who don't feel things. They're people who've developed systems for processing their emotions quickly and efficiently, and for maintaining equanimity under pressure. Meditation, journaling, therapy, and exercise are all evidence-based tools for emotional regulation. The ones who consistently produce the most don't have fewer emotions challenges. They just have better tools for managing them. Spiritual and/or purpose energy. the deepest fuel. By spiritual, I don't mean religious, though for some people that's part of it. I mean, do you have a clear and compelling sense of why you're doing what you're doing? Is your work connected to something that feels meaningful to you? Do you, at a gut level, that what you're spending your finite time on matters? Purpose is fuel. It is not a nice to have luxury. It is one of the most powerful performance enhancers available to any human being. People who are deeply connected to a compelling why will routinely outperform more talented people who lack that connection. They work harder, they recover faster, they persist longer, they're more creative, they sleep more soundly, they show up more fully. If your routine doesn't include regular reconnection to your purpose, why you're doing what you're doing, what you're working towards, who it's for, what it will mean, then you're leaving enormous reserves of energy untapped. The strategic planning block in the morning is partly designed to serve this function, but it needs reinforcement throughout the week. Part 5. The Evening Protocol. How you end determines how you begin. Why most people get this completely backwards. The morning gets all the attention in productivity literature. 5 a.m. clubs, morning pages, power hours. The evening, by comparison, is treated as optional, a reward for getting through the day. Put the kids to bed, watch Netflix, scroll until you're tired, pass out. This is backwards. The evening protocol is not how you end today. It's how you begin tomorrow, the decisions you make, and the preparations you do. In the final hours before sleep have a massive impact on the quality of the following morning. Conversely, a chaotic, screen-heavy, poorly wound-down evening leads to fragmented sleep, a groggy start, and a morning where you're playing catch-up from the moment you open your eyes. The evening is not optional. It is foundational. The 3-part evening protocol. Part 1. The shutdown ritual. 20 to 30 minutes. The shutdown ritual is the deliberate act of closing the workday. It sounds unnecessary. It is absolutely essential. Most knowledge workers never actually stop working. They close their laptop, but their brain keeps going. While they're eating dinner, they're mentally composing emails. While they're playing with their kids, they're running through tomorrow's to-do list. While they're lying in bed, they're catastrophizing about the presentation next week. The mind, never given a clear signal that work is done, never fully recovers. The shutdown ritual is that signal. It consists of 3 elements. Reviewing what you accomplished today. This matters. Don't skip it. Your brain needs to register progress. Reviewing your calendar and task list for tomorrow. Your brain doesn't feel the need to keep monitoring it throughout the night. And saying a specific phrase that marks the end of the work. That phrase can be anything. Cal Newport literally says "shutdown complete" out loud. That works for some people. For others, it's a specific physical action. Closing the planner, turning off the desk lamp, or locking the home office. The content matters less than the consistency. The brain needs a pattern it can recognize as the boundary between work mode and recovery mode. Create that boundary deliberately. Part 2. The evening wind down. 60 to 90 minutes before sleep. In the 60 to 90 minutes before sleep, the goal is to progressively reduce your arousal level so that by the time you get into bed, your brain is ready to transition into sleep rather than needing to find its way there. This means no screens, or at minimum, screen brightness significantly reduced and blue light filtered. Screens emit light in the blue spectrum, which suppresses melatonin production and signals to your brain that it's still daytime. Using your phone or watching TV until the moment you want to sleep and then expecting to fall asleep quickly is neurologically incoherent. It's like running a marathon and then expecting your heart rate to be 60 the moment you stop. Wind down activities include reading physical books, gentle stretching, a warm shower or bath. The subsequent drop in body temperature triggers sleepiness, calm conversation, journaling, or simply sitting quietly. The goal is down regulation, moving from alert and active to calm and ready to sleep. Part 3. The evening review and reflection. 10 to 15 minutes. Before sleep, spend 10 to 15 minutes in honest reflection. No rumination. Reflection, there's a difference. Rumination is going over your mistakes and failures in a loop, amplifying negative emotion. Reflection is learning from the day with a degree of emotional detachment. The questions to answer: what did I accomplish today that matters? What did I fail to do that I said I will do? And why? What am I most grateful for from today? What's the single most important thing I want to accomplish tomorrow? This practice has multiple benefits. It trains your brain to extract learning from experience rather than just accumulating days. It creates closure, reducing the likelihood that unfinished thoughts will intrude on your sleep. And it primes your subconscious to work on tomorrow's priorities while you sleep. Something the brain does remarkably well when given a clear problem to solve before unconsciousness. Part 6. The Weekly Review, your course correction system. Why daily habits aren't enough. Daily habits are the engine, but even the best engine needs steering. Without a regular mechanism to zoom out, evaluate your direction, and adjust your course, you can execute your daily routine with perfect consistency and still end up somewhere you didn't intend to be. The weekly review is your steering mechanism. Done correctly, it takes 60 to 90 minutes and covers 4 domains: what you accomplished this week, what you didn't accomplish and why, whether your current actions are actually aligned with your most important goals, and what adjustments you need to make going forward. The 4-part weekly review. 1. The accomplishment audit. Start by listing everything you've actually accomplished this week. Not what you planned, what you actually did. This is important because high achievers are pathologically bad at giving themselves credit. They complete 10 things and focus on the 3 they didn't complete. This bias towards incompletion creates a chronic sense of falling behind, which breeds anxiety, which undermines performance. Acknowledging what you've done is not self-congratulation, it's accurate accounting. 2. The gap analysis. What did you intend to do that you didn't do? For each uncompleted item, ask why honestly. Was it genuinely not important? Did something more important come up? Or did you avoid it because it was hard, uncomfortable, or uncertain? The third category is the one that matters. Avoidance is usually how ambition dies. Not in a dramatic moment of quitting, but in a quiet series of postponements that eventually become permanent. The gap analysis forces you to confront avoidance patterns before they solidify. Number 3. The alignment check. Are you spending the majority of your time on the activities that are most likely to produce the outcomes you want? This is not always obvious. It's easy to stay very busy doing things that feel productive but are actually low-leverage tasks that give you the sensation of working without actually moving the needle of your most important goals. For this check, list your top 3 goals. Then list the 5 activities that you spend the most time on this week. If there isn't significant overlap between those 2 lists, you have an alignment problem. You're spending your time on things that aren't actually going to produce the results you say you want. No amount of optimization of those activities will fix the fundamental problem, which is you're optimizing the wrong things. Number 4. The planning and commitment block. The final section of the weekly review is where you plan the week ahead. Not hour by hour, that's for the daily planning block. But you identify the 3 to 5 most important outcomes for the week. Schedule the deep work blocks where you'll pursue them and commit to the non-negotiables. The elements of your morning protocol, your exercise sessions, your shutdown rituals. The weekly review is not glamorous. It doesn't feel like progress in the moment. But it is the mechanism by which you maintain strategic direction while executing tactically. Without it, the daily routine becomes very efficient travel in a direction you didn't consciously choose. Part 7. Building the habit stack, making it automatic. The neuroscience of habit formation. Here's what most people don't understand about habits. You don't actually build habits. Your brain builds them for you. Your job is to create the conditions under which the brain's natural habit formation processes can operate effectively. Every habit consists of 3 elements: a cue, a trigger that prompts the behavior, a routine, the behavior itself, and a reward, the positive consequence that reinforces the behavior. The brain automates repeated sequences of cue, routine, reward into neural pathways so that over time, The cue alone is sufficient to trigger the behavior without deliberate conscious thought. This is the basal ganglia at work, the ancient, automatic part of your brain that governs habitual behavior. When you first try to implement a new morning routine, it requires enormous conscious effort. You have to remember each step, you have to override competing impulses, you have to deliberately choose the behavior against the pull of old patterns. This is cognitively exhausting, and it's why most habit attempts fail in the first 2 weeks. People mistake the initial difficulty for evidence that the behavior doesn't work for them, when actually it's just the normal friction of establishing a new neural pathway. The research suggests that simple habits take an average of 66 days to become automatic, not the 21st days you may have heard. Complex habit stacks, like a full morning protocol, can take several months. This is not failure, this is the expected timeline. The question is whether you're going to keep showing up through the resistance phase, or whether you're going to quit and tell yourself it didn't work. The implementation principles. Principle 1. Start smaller than feels ambitious. The single most common reason people fail to build new habits is that they start too big. They're inspired. They design a 90-minute morning protocol with 6 components, and they try to implement it all at once. Day 1 goes okay. Day 2 is harder. Day 3, they hit resistance and skip one element. Day 5, they miss the whole morning. By day 10, they've abandoned it and concluded that morning routines aren't for them. The antidote is embarrassingly simple. Start smaller, much smaller. If you currently have no morning protocol, your first goal is not a 90-minute protocol. Your first goal is a 5 minutes of anything intentional in the morning. 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of stretching, 5 minutes of not looking at your phone, just 5 minutes of being deliberate. Once that's automatic, once you don't have to think about it, you add another 5 minutes, then another. You build slowly and incrementally, and you never move to the next piece until the current piece is locked in. This approach feels frustratingly slow. It is also the only approach that reliably works. Principle 2. Design for failure. You will miss days. You will have weeks where life overwhelms the structure. Travel, illness, family emergencies, emotional crisis. Any of these can derail a routine. The question is not how to prevent this. You can't. But how to ensure it's a temporary deviation rather than the end of the habit. The rule: never miss twice. Missing one is human. Missing twice is the beginning of a new, bad habit. The moment you miss 2 days in a row, the neural pathway you've been building starts to weaken, and the old pattern starts to reassert itself. 1 miss is an anomaly. 2 misses is a pattern. 3 misses is a relapse. Design your system with this in mind. Have a minimum viable version of your morning protocol that can be executed in 10 minutes, even when everything is chaotic. Travel version, sick version, sleep-deprived version. The full protocol is the goal, but showing up with the minimum version on the hard days is what keeps the chain unbroken and the neural pathway intact. Principle 3. Environment design over willpower. You've heard this before, but it bears hammering home. Change your environment before you try to change your behavior. Make the desired behavior easy and the undesired behavior hard. Don't rely on motivation or willpower to sustain habits. Design your context so that the habits happen almost by default. Put your workout clothes next to your bed so you see them the moment you wake up. Put your journal on your pillow so you can't miss it before sleep. Remove the app from your phone that you always reach for in the morning. Put your phone charger in a different room so you're not tempted to check it in bed. Use website blockers during your deep work blocks. Stock your kitchen with the foods that support your energy and remove the foods that undermine it. These seem like tiny changes. They are not. They are the difference between a habit that requires daily willpower to sustain, fragile, and a habit that is supported by your environment, robust. Build for robustness. Principle 4. Track to win. What gets measured gets managed. This cliché exists because it's true. Tracking your habits, even a simple checkmark in a notebook for each day you show up, creates multiple powerful psychological effects. It makes your progress visible, which is motivating. It creates accountability, which increases follow through. And it creates what James Clear calls the quote unquote don't break the chain effect. Once you have a streak of consecutive days, the prospect of breaking it becomes psychologically uncomfortable, making you more likely to keep going even on the days you'd rather skip. Don't over engineer your tracking system. A simple habit tracker, physical or digital, with one row per habit and one column per day is sufficient. Look at it every morning, update it every evening. Let the visual record of your consistency be a source of pride and momentum. Part 8. The Identity Shift. The foundation everything else rests on. Behaviors follow identity. Everything we've covered so far, the morning protocol, the deep work blocks, the energy management, the evening protocol, the weekly review, the habit building principles, all of it's tactical. And tactics, without the right foundational identity, will eventually fail. Here's why. Most people try to change their behavior through motivation. They want to feel inspired, so they listen to podcasts, read books, attend seminars. The motivation creates a temporary surge of intention, which drives short term behavior change. But motivation is volatile. It fluctuates with mood, energy, and circumstance. When motivation fades, and it always does, behavior reverts to whatever the underlying identity supports. The person who secretly believes they're not a disciplined person will always eventually revert to undisciplined behavior. No matter how many productivity systems they try, the person who sees themselves as fundamentally unhealthy will always eventually revert to unhealthy habits, despite repeated attempts at diet and exercise. The identity is the operating system. The behaviors are just the applications running on top of it. Change the applications without changing the operating system, and the system keeps crashing. The target is not better behaviors. The target is a better identity, a fundamentally different self concept, from which better behaviors emerge naturally and consistently. How identity actually changes. Identity is not changed by declarations. Standing in a mirror and telling yourself you're a disciplined, high performing person doesn't make it so. Identity changes through accumulated evidence. Every time you take an action consistent with the person you want to become, you cast a vote for that identity. Every time you take an action inconsistent with it, you cast a vote against it. The goal is not to win every vote. The goal is to win the majority. And over time, as the evidence accumulates, your self concept shifts to reflect the pattern. You stop being a person who's trying to be disciplined, and you start being a disciplined person. You stop being a person who's trying to be a writer, and you start being a writer. The distinction sounds semantic. Its behavioral implications are enormous. This is why the small habits matter so much, especially in the beginning. The person who meditates for 5 minutes every morning for 60 days has cast 60 votes for the identity of a person who meditates. Those votes compound into a self concept. Quote, I'm the kind of person who meditates. And that self concept will now defend itself because people act consistently with who they believe themselves to be. The declarations that actually work. There is a place for conscious identity declaration, but it has to be done correctly. The declarations that change behavior are not affirmations of a current state you don't believe in. They are commitments to a process of becoming. Not, I am a best selling author. Your brain rejects this if it's not yet true. But, I am someone who writes every day, and every day I'm becoming a better, more prolific writer. Not, I am wealthy and financially free. But, I am someone who builds wealth systematically, one good financial decision at a time. The distinction is crucial. The first type of declaration is the wishful thinking your brain correctly identifies as false and dismisses. The second type is a declaration of process and direction. It's true in the moment you say it, you are taking those actions, you're moving in that direction, and it describes an identity that is being formed rather than one that has to exist fully formed already. Identity across the long game. The final thing to understand about identity is that it's forged in the long game. The person you are in 2 years is the sum of the choices you make in the next 700 days. Not the dramatic choices, not the big decisions, the tiny, daily, invisible choices about whether to show up to your morning protocol when you don't feel like it. Whether to do the deep work blog even though the news is interesting and the email is piling up. Whether to say no to the evening activity that will wreck your sleep and your morning. Whether to do the weekly review even though it takes time you could use for something more immediately gratifying. None of these choices look significant in isolation. In aggregate, they are the difference between a life that compounds in your favor and a life that compounds against you. This is a choice available to everyone, not just the privileged, not just the talented, not just the people who were raised in the right environment or who got the lucky breaks. Every person reading these words has the capacity to design their days with intention and execute against a structure that compounds towards the outcomes they want. The tools are available. The knowledge is available. The only question is whether you're willing to do the boring, unsexy, repetitive work of actually implementing it. Part 9. Navigating Resistance, Setbacks, and the Long Plateau. The Trough of Disillusionment. About 3 to 4 weeks into a new routine, almost everyone hits what we can call the trough of disillusionment. The initial excitement has worn off. The results haven't yet come visible or dramatic. The novelty is gone, and all you have is the grind of showing up to a structure that still requires conscious effort and doesn't feel yet natural. This is the point where most people quit. Not because the system isn't working. It is, even if you can't see it yet. But because the gap between effort and visible results feels too large to justify continuing. The discipline required at this stage exceeds the motivation available. The antidote is twofold. First, trust the compounding. Results from good daily habits are almost never linear. They're exponential, which means they're invisible for the first portion of the curve and then suddenly dramatic. The 3 weeks of effort you put in are not wasted just because you can't see the payoff yet. The roots are forming underground. The surface will change when the structure is ready. Second, lower the target. At the throw, the goal is not to excel. The goal is to not quit. Show up with minimal viable effort if you have to. Do the 5-minute version of your morning protocol. Write 100 words instead of 500. Do one set instead of 3. But don't break the chain. Keep the identity intact. The performance will return. The streak is harder to rebuild than to maintain. Common failure modes and how to avoid them. The perfectionism trap. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress in the context of building daily routines. The perfectionist designs an elaborate, comprehensive system, perfectly optimized, logically airtight, and then finds every possible reason why today isn't the right day to start. The traffic patterns needs to be ideal, the workspace needs to be perfect, the coffee needs to be exactly right. And in this endless preparation for perfect conditions, the work never actually gets done. Ship imperfect execution every single day. A mediocre morning routine executed consistently beats a perfect morning routine never executed at all. Start before you're ready. Begin with what you have. Refine as you go. The all or nothing fallacy. I already missed my workout, so the whole day is ruined. This thought pattern, common, insidious, and completely counterproductive, turns a small setback into a total day wasted. One missed element of your routine is not a failed day. It is a missed element. The rest of the day is still available. The right response is not to abandon the structure, but to execute everything else and note what you'll do differently tomorrow. Your routine is not a house of cards where pulling one piece causes the whole thing to collapse. It's a portfolio of behaviors, each with its own independent value. Losing one day's workout doesn't erase the fitness gains from the last 20 days. Missing one meditation session doesn't undo the neural rewiring from the previous 30 days of practice. Stop treating each day as a binary pass or fail, and start treating it as a collection of independent opportunities to show up. The comparison death spiral. Nothing will kill your motivation more reliably than comparing your beginnings to someone else's middle. You see the entrepreneur who wakes up at 4 a.m., runs 10 miles, writes 2,000 words, and has multiple businesses running before most people eat breakfast. And you compare that to where you are right now, 6 months into trying to establish a 20-minute morning protocol, and the gap feels insurmountable. That comparison is functionally useless. The person you're comparing yourself to didn't start there. They built to there, over years, with precisely the kind of incremental habit accumulation we're discussing here. The gap you're seeing is not a gap in talent or luck. It's a gap in reps, and reps are closed by showing up every day, not by being discouraged by the gap. The only comparison that matters is you versus you from a year ago. Are you further along than you were? Are your habits more consistent? Is your output higher? Is your clarity better? This is the only scorecard that will lead you in the right direction. Part 10. Customization. Building the version that works for you. The principles are universal. The implementation is personal. Everything in this essay is based on universal principles of human cognition, neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and the documented habits of high performers. But the specific implementation has to be yours. The schedule that works for a single founder working from home is different from the one that works for a parent of 3 kids with a demanding corporate job. The morning protocol that works for a natural early riser is different from the one that works for a night owl. The principles don't change. You protect your high energy hours for deep work, you create a mindset anchor at the start of the day, you batch your communication and shallow work, you shut down deliberately in the evening, you review weekly, you manage energy, not just time. These are non negotiable. But the specifics, when you wake up, how long your morning protocol runs, how many deep work blocks you have, which elements you include, all of these need to be calibrated to your life, your biology, your constraints, and your goals. How to customize your routine. Start by answering 4 questions honestly. First, when are you genuinely at your cognitive best? Not when you think you should be, not when productivity culture tells you to be. When do you actually do your best thinking? Some people are ferociously sharp from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and run out of steam by afternoon. Others don't hit their peak until 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. A minority are generally better in the evenings. Know your biology and schedule your deep work there, regardless of what time that appears to be. Second, what are the non-negotiables in your life that must be accommodated? Family responsibilities, work hours, commute times, recurring commitments. These are the constraints around which your routine must be built. Don't design an ideal routine and then discover that it's incompatible with your actual life. Design within your actual life and find the optimal structure within those constraints. Third, what is the single most important goal you're currently working toward? Not your 5 goals or your 10 aspirations. Your one most important goal right now. Everything in your routine should be in service of this goal. The deep work blocks are for this goal. The weekly review is assessing progress towards this goal. If your routine isn't clearly tilted in the direction of your most important goal, it's not actually a goal achieving routine. It's just a set of good habits. Fourth, what are your biggest failure patterns from previous attempts at routine building? Where do you consistently fall apart? Mornings, the mid afternoon slump, evening screen use, social commitments that bleed into sleep? Whatever your historical failure patterns are, design your new routine with explicit protections against those specific vulnerabilities. You know when you're likely to fail, build defense before you fall off the cliff. Conclusion. The unglamorous path to the extraordinary. We've covered a lot of ground. The architecture of a high-performance day, the 5-element morning protocol, the deep work structure, the 4 dimensions of energy management, the evening shutdown ritual, the weekly review, the habit-building principles, the identity shift, the failure modes, the customization framework. All of it points to the same fundamental conclusion. Extraordinary outcomes are the results of ordinary actions performed with extraordinary consistency over a long period of time. There's no secret. There's no hack that bypasses the compounding. There's no shortcut that eliminates the need to show up every day and do the work. Every person you admired for their achievements, every entrepreneur who built something remarkable, every athlete who reached the peak of their sport, every artist who created something that moved you, every parent who raised genuinely exceptional children, got there through a version of what we discuss here. Relentless, consistent, intentional effort applied to a clear goal, day after day, with the wisdom to manage their energy, protect their time, and adjust their course as needed. The reason this isn't more common is not because it's secret knowledge. It's because it's hard. Not complicated, hard. It requires you to say no to things that feel good, now in service of outcomes that will pay off later. It requires you to sit down and do the work when you rather consume. It requires you to design your days with the seriousness that most people reserve for their vacations. But here's the thing about hard things: they are hard for everyone. The person you're competing with, the one ahead of you in your industry, your field, your pursuit, finds it just as difficult to show up consistently, manage their energy, and protect their deep work time. The difference between them and you is not that it's easier for them, it's that they decided it's worth it. And then they build the structures to make the decision stick even when the motivation isn't there. You can make that decision right now. Not when conditions are met, not when you have more time, more money, more certainty about your direction. Right now, with the life you have, the constraints you have, and the resources you have. You can decide that your days will be designed rather than reactive, that your mornings will be protected, that your most important work will get your best hours, that your energy will be managed with the same care you give to your money, that you will show up for the weekly review even when it's inconvenient, that you will keep going through the drought of disillusionment. If you do this, not perfectly, but consistently, not dramatically, but persistently, you will look up in 12 months and barely recognize your life. Not because the universe rewarded you for having a routine, but because 365 days of deliberate action, compounded, procedures results that are simply not available to the person who spends the same 365 days living reactively. The architecture is here. The blueprint is in your hands. The only variable that remains is whether you'll build. Quote, "The most successful people are not the most talented. They are the ones who have designed their days to make their goals inevitable." Appendix: Your 30-day implementation plan. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. Here is a concrete 30-day plan to implement what you've read. Week 1, days 1 to 7, the foundation. Pick one element of the morning protocol and implement it consistently. Choose the no input zone, no phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. That's it. Just that one thing, every morning for 7 days. Week 2, days 8 to 14, the body. Add the movement element. 20 to 30 minutes of intentional physical movement in the morning, every day. Keep the no input zone. You now have a 2-element morning protocol. Week 3, days 15 to 21, the mind. Add the mindset anchoring practice. 10 minutes of journaling or meditation. 3 elements, still relatively simple, still very manageable. Week 4, days 22 to 30, the work. Add the strategic planning block to your first intentional deep work block. This week, for the first time, you identify your MIT every morning and protect at least 60 minutes for focused, uninterrupted work on it. Implemented the shutdown ritual in the evening. At the end of the 30 days, you will have the skeleton of a high-performance daily routine. It won't be perfect, it will have had missed days, but you will have the pattern established, the behaviors beginning to solidify, and most importantly, evidence that you can do this. From there, you build. You add elements, you refine, you increase the depth of your work blocks, you strengthen the evening protocol, you add the weekly review, you do the identity work. Month by month, the compound interest accrues. You started, that's the hardest part. Everything after that is just showing up.